Welcome to another edition of Free and Equal TV. I'm your host today, Kristan T. Harris, filling in for Christina Tobin. And boy, do we have an exciting show for you today. We have a wonderful guest. Audrey Addison Williams is joining us. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am phenomenal, Kristan, and very excited to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you too because we have something in common. You want to know what that is?
What is that?
I ran as a presidential candidate in 2020 as a potential transhumanist, but not because I want to live forever, but because I wanted to bring up the issue of ethics behind people who want to live forever, and should we be making designer babies and things like that. It's always wonderful to meet another person who's trying to impact change in their community.
Well, I bow to you and anyone who has ever run for president. Our country needs more people like you who are willing to step up. This is a pivotal moment in history, and we need voices that are not heard.
So I got to ask you, what encouraged you to run for president as a presidential candidate? Were you like me and you thought, oh, I could definitely do better than the last slew of presidents we've had? What was it that inspired you to run?
Well, of course, that feeling has been there most of my life. I was raised in a Republican household in the 60s. So just imagine when the civil rights movement has taken off, my father was a renowned Republican, and he moved us to middle class by speaking to Republican groups. But of course, that was a different Republican Party. I got a direct hit from spirit, and that may mean different things to different people. I surrendered my life to Christ in 1986, and I was commanded, I was ordered to run. I had been told 22 years before, and while I was sitting on the couch pretending not to hear, someone who didn't know me called me up, asked to meet with me, and came with a prophetic message that I was to run for president. And so, needless to say, that bolted me out of my inertia into forward movement to act upon what I was called to do.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive and important to listen to the calling. I can understand how that feels where you have that energy that pulls you in a certain direction and you feel and you know it's the right thing to do and everything works out for you. And you just feel the calling. And if you don't listen to it, there always seems to be like some kind of repercussions for not listening to that energy. But when we're talking about presidential campaigns, it seems like there's a lot of money raised. Do you think the money that's actually raised for all these political campaigns actually helps its constituents and the citizens of America?
Well, let's just look at 2016, 6.8 billion, 2020, 14 billion. And so I think you really answered your own question. Um, but what we need to look at, I believe, is our own level of accountability as Americans and how we contribute to this craziness. There's so much talk about get money out of the elections, and I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. But I'm more focused on what we can do as citizens, and what we can do is stop giving money to people who will tell us what we want to hear. It comes down to that. I'm on Republican databases, Democrat, Independent, and all of them peddle the truth, all of them, in exchange for money. And so we as citizens can be more thoughtful and greater stewards of what we have and more aligned with what is important for America versus our individual party and preferences.
I find that interesting because you see all that money raised, and it's like, how much of it actually goes to actually helping its constituents and the people that vote for these candidates? Like, I can't even imagine what I would do with that kind of money. It almost seems wasteful, but yet they're able to fundraise, and a lot of them have the same lobbyists. So you have to ask yourself, the rhetoric might be different, but is there actually a difference between this two-party system that we have when we're voting for a president? And that's kind of what encouraged me to run, is that I was kind of sick of the two-party system, and I found that there's a lot of people we have common ground. Where Federal Reserve, anti-police state. That brings me to my next question. What are your thoughts on the criminal justice system and what the current situation is here in America?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I happened to do a little research before coming on, and depending on who you ask or what link you follow, Black Lives Matter took in 90 million in 2020. According to one link, since George Floyd, Black Lives Matter has taken in $10.6 billion. Now, I can't vouch for the accuracy of those figures. But again, the criminal justice system is responsible for, well, I call it the prison industrial complex, is responsible for the mass incarceration of people of color. We incarcerate more people than any civilized nation. And so why do we do that? So I believe if we begin to deconstruct any part of our system, we realize that it's all interwoven. America thrives because of us versus them. That's how this insanity keeps going. And so the criminal justice system, I was talking to someone in the UK, and I was not aware that you're not labeled a felon forever. So when you come out after you've done your time in the UK, you're not punished forever and labeled a felon. So why does this happen? It happens because of systemic racism. The bottomless pit that we fall into, however, is that no one wins. No one wins. And what do I mean by that? Since George Floyd was killed, 1,068 people have been killed by police. Now, I'm not sure a particular month, but in one given period of time, 457 was the number of whites, 399 was the number of blacks. And another period of time, 223 was the number of whites, 209 the number of blacks. So no one can argue that there's a disproportionate number of black people. But what happens to that white mother whose son is executed by police while we are having marches through town and Al Sharpton is preaching the funeral of someone who was shot down because they're black? Do you see where this is not going to get us anywhere except stuck on stupid? Okay, so yes, Black Lives Matter, but my life will only matter to the extent that everyone's life matters. And so Black Lives Matter was saying Black Lives Matter too. But the problem that I see with the trajectory that we're now on is the same pattern we follow with affirmative action and everything else. Someone is punished in order to try and make something right for someone else. And no one ever looks at the systemic issues that cause the imbalance in the first place and say, let's address that and not put a Band-Aid on the problem. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You know, you can see a lot when it comes to these things that we really have an issue in America with the prison industrial complex. A lot of them have like minimum incarceration rates. They have to have 80% mandates in order to keep the prisons full. It doesn't really give a judge the ability to have an honest verdict, if you ask me, in a lot of these cases.
Well, I know a lot of judges, and I know that this is true, but let's go back. I love history. And so the war on drugs, what was that about?
Iran-Contra, raising money for illegal wars.
Okay, the whole, how many black men's lives have been destroyed because of a little bit of marijuana?
A lot.
And now America has figured out how to make money on it. If you look back, every candidacy for president, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and I want to be thoughtful as I say this, every issue that's raised, for the most part, panders to white women. To white women. That's whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican. Because you scare the crap out of white women, and they're going to go to the polls. Why am I saying this? Because I want white women to wake up. And I want white women to understand the power that we have as women, but the power that white women have. The fear of crime, and that's black bodies really, it's not the fear of crime, it's the fear of black bodies, is basically, has been used by Republicans and Democrats to get white women to vote and to support. You know, when you look at the Clinton administration, and Bill Clinton is regarded by some as the first black president. But if you look at his policies, we begin to understand, and this is what I want America. I want us to wake up and stay awake. Clinton's policies in many, many cases hurt black people to the same extent that, say, George Bush's policies are even more so. But because we're so polarized, and Democrat versus Republican, and we don't have critical thinking skills, we're not able to say, but what are they not telling me? And how does this impact the whole and not just myself?
So when you mention critical thinking, do you think that's something that America is lacking today?
Absolutely. We're not taught in schools. The more educated we are, the more difficulty we have thinking ourselves out of a paper bag. We are not taught critical thinking skills. We don't know how to think critically. In order to think critically, first of all, that takes some time and effort. It's a skill like anything else. And if we're lazy mind and zoned out in front of the television, we're going to be bored with trying to figure out who's lying to us and who's telling the truth, or where is the middle ground. But critical thinking requires that we hold two opposing viewpoints in our mind at the same time and lend credibility to both of them. If we're able to do that, then we become catalysts for change because we're able to see the value in all perspectives. And that's, the problem with America, the us versus them, is that the value that we could gain from an opposing viewpoint, we miss because we're not open to that opposing viewpoint. Let me give you an example. And I'm going to mention this name, and anybody black who hears this is going to want to turn me off. Okay, so Clarence Thomas, not famous to black people, not popular. I read his life story, and he said something that made so much sense to me. One thing. He said, instead of busing black children into white neighborhoods and sending them to white schools, why couldn't they have given money to black schools? Think about that. And when I ask people that, they look at me sort of like, duh. Well, black schools weren't really capable. Well, after slavery, we built universities. There was no government to give us anything. We weren't released from slavery with a stimulus package. We were released from slavery with nothing. And we built communities, we built universities, and illiterate people sent their children to college and ended up educating PhDs. So it's nonsense to say that if we had given money to black schools, we would not have ended up perhaps better off. But why did that not occur to the people in charge? Why? Well, and I don't know, but I say this, I say by busing us to black schools, long term, how has that worked out for us? How has that worked out for us? My father, who had no formal education and mentored PhDs, said that some black people would assimilate into mainstream culture. I assimilated well. He said that those of us who did would not be willing to go back or would not have the tools to go back to reach those that did not. Now, in the 60s, prior to the Civil Rights Movement, poor did not mean annihilism. Poor did not mean that we were killing one another's kids. Poverty was not something that was really conceptualized and understood. For the most part, you had food and a roof over your head. The homelessness you see in Santa Barbara is bizarre based upon that time. And so when we think about how it is that we did so much with so little for ourselves and our children during that time, and now in places like Chicago, Baltimore, our kids are killing each other. And how much emphasis did Black Lives Matter place on that this summer and last summer? How many black leaders do you hear talking about what's going on in Chicago? Do you think that a woman who lives in Chicago, who loses her 6-month-old to a drive-by shooting, is she any less important than George Floyd's family? This is the problem with America. This is the problem with America. Until we're able to look through a wider lens, and until we're willing to be honest and say that the nation that we have now is really not working for any of us except the few elite. Except the few elite. I was speaking with you earlier, and I said, Bob Dylan's song, "We're all a pawn in their game." You told me there's a book, but that's where we are in America today, and that's why I speak, and that's why I respect Christine Tobin so much. Her audacity to say that there's a different way to do this, her courage and her passion to keep moving forward, even though it's not a popular message, to have the audacity to say elections can be free and can be equal. Okay, this is why I speak, because we have so much potential as Americans to change the course, not just of America, but history. And I'm just excited to even be involved in this dialogue with you.
No, I appreciate you coming on. I have a question. Is
No, I
simplistic
appreciate you coming
thinking
on. I have a question.
what is driving like partisan divide in America today?
Like partisan divide in America.
Well, there's an agenda. Again, first of all, and I'm sure you know this, but the president doesn't really control the United States of America, right? The president is not the one power. All right, there are others pulling the strings. We know this. There is an agenda that's driving the partisan divide, and it works because they're pandering fear. Anytime you can make people afraid of anything or anyone, you win. So what are we afraid of in America right now? Well, I was with a group of people on Sunday, and the dirty word was socialism. What does that mean, and why are you afraid of socialism? Crime. You can say crime. Crime is increasing in New York, and people are terrified, and they'll vote a certain way just so we'll get tough on crime again. People are afraid of Asians now because of the pandemic. So Black Lives Matter and you're killing Asians. How does that work for anyone? The political divide is intentional. It's on purpose. But we are playing the game, and we are participating in our own oppression and subjugation. And that's the message. What do we need to do? First, what we need to do is pledge our allegiance to a nation that works for everyone. That's step number one. In order to do that, we have to be willing to step outside of the particularity of our own experience. There's over 300 million Americans, and we don't know who the other is. And we are inclined to be afraid of that which we don't know and don't understand. So we pledge allegiance to a nation that works for everyone, and we become willing. We become willing to be the change. We no longer sit back and figure who we're going to vote for, but we say, now is our time. We are the people. We are all called to do something differently, but we're all called to participate.
Wow, powerful words.
Powerful.
I'm going to leave you with this last question here. If there's one message you could leave for the children of the future, what would it be?
The children of the future, they inspire me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep knowing what you're knowing. Don't buy into this agenda. I encourage you, I inspire you, but you came into this earth plane with knowledge and with wisdom that we all need. We are counting on you. We need your voice. We need your passion. We need your vision. Keep doing what you're doing.
And for those who are listening, Audrey Addison Williams will be speaking at our 4th of July weekend event. The United We Stand Cambria. All proceeds will go to support the Cambria Skate Park Initiative. I look forward to meeting you in California. It'll be a wonderful time, and hopefully we'll be able to share some quality conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on Free and Equal TV today, and what a wonderful conversation we had.
Thank you so much, Kristan. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, have a blessed night. We'll see you guys soon in Cambria.